For everybody that's listening, please, if you don't mind sharing, I want to know what your foundations are as far as finances, relationships, and just overall morals. What's up, blessed ones? You are now blaring the podcast. Brought to you by AB1 Studios. Thank you for your time. Listening. You wanna know something else, blessed ones? Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thy own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. So that was something like John 3:16 always resonated with me, because we all have a life that we live, and it's human nature to want to answer and have questions too. And when it talks about leaning that towards one's own understanding, you have to then look outside of your own experience, your own knowledge, and your own self in some ways. And I know how hard it can be, but we all have a foundation. Sometimes we might not know what that foundation is, but we have to also take into account that when it comes to individuality, we have to be able to identify ourselves of who we are outside of how we was raised, how we are viewed by society, and having a relationship with a higher being. Because to each his own, I understand and know that not everybody believes in God or high power, and those of you who might not believe in, or follow the Bible, there is still something outside of your control, because life really do be lifing. And I will say, I didn't necessarily know how I was going to come up here and address certain things, because like I say, sometimes life really be life. And when I decide to pod, YouTube, Facebook, do anything, I really have a purpose on that. So even in, when I ask, what is your foundation? I'm always gonna will and I might have already have an answer to my own. Like I won't ask a question unless I might have already have an answer to that same question. And if I do have a question and not answer and not have an answer to it, I am asking to attain insight on it. Because for those of you who are repeated listeners, know that I have a strong mind and very highly opinionated, but at the same time, I'm all about doing what is right. Maybe not everybody's going to resonate or understand it, but to me, it's doing the right thing. I always try my best, even if I don't follow through. I always try my best to seek not toward my own understanding, and not that I want people to do what I do, but I do want people to take a little bit more consideration on looking beyond their own understanding, because everybody's opinion is a fact. Everybody has to go through life. Everybody has their own problems. Everybody also has, their own village. However, at the same time, that does not negate the fact that we are all human beings. Does not negate the fact that, you know, God is watching and allowing things. That does not negate the fact that you're not the only one in this world. And whatever your purpose is in life, it will not go in vain. The hardest thing, speaking for myself, to do is to really tell someone else how to live their life. But what's even more difficult than the hardest thing is allowing yourself to not let it consume you so much. I talk about this with my friend all the time as far as just being compassionate and considerate. Sometimes we would put expectations on other people, and nothing's wrong with that. But it's almost kind of like sometimes when you are pouring into someone and it's not being reciprocated, it's going to take into account. And sometimes, and this is something that I'm still learning. I learned something new as far as compassion is there's a difference between compassion and sympathy. Compassion has a lot to do with practicing what you're preaching. It's like if you are giving, if you are showing grace to someone and you're having compassion for them, that is noble, that is great. But also, part of compassion also is, being able to feel for that person and be willing to help. Going back to consideration, but you have to have a strong foundation to have compassion, a certain type of compassion anyway, because people can always hold you accountable. People can always, misjudge you, but there's a foundation that we all have. Like, what's your foundation at work? Your foundation at work, your foundation at in relationships, your foundation in just your life can all be different things. But the the underlying meaning of foundation is really based upon the principles and basis. So to me, the foundation for me is God and Christ and the Bible, the Holy Bible, the as the world would probably say, the Christian faith Bible. And I'm not going to condemn anyone, but as someone who has that type of foundation, it's not my place to condemn you, but it would be not it would be wrong for me not to chastise, not to be critical, but acknowledging and recognizing that someone might have a different belief system than me or a different way of life than me shouldn't stray away from what I need to do. But it goes back again to knowing where you are, knowing your village, because it would just be talking to a brick wall if you're not speaking to someone with the same beliefs as you. So that's why it's important that we have to congregate with like-minded people, because we then can hold people accountable and stand firm on the foundation that y'all both share together or separate. Because if I'm in proximity or in a community with atheists, or in a community with, you know, let's say just Satanists, what I say and what I do, they might not understand. It might not resonate with them because they haven't got there yet. My foundation of God is to love everyone, respect everyone. Don't have to agree, don't have to like, don't even have to align myself with everything that people of my opposite does. But my foundation of God is to love and to respect. And respect doesn't always mean, you know, no, agree with it. Respecting someone really is just as far as conversation, communication is giving everyone the you know, treat them as a human being, not necessarily respect the words like, hey, I have to listen to this person, because we also have to be careful in what we consume. I have the tendency, it almost sounds like confessions, but I have a tendency to cut people off when they talk. Now, even though it's not my intention, it has been pointed out to me that it comes off as if what I have to say is more important, it comes off as I don't care what anybody else has to say, and it even comes off as me just wanting to hear myself talk. But the truth is just there sometimes I might be consumed with a different type of spirit that's like, and not all the time. I just want to make fools not all the time, but I can recognize those times when it's like I'm overwhelmed with the spirit of no, that's incorrect, and I'm not going to allow someone to even say certain things to me that is wrong. But again, that's my flaw. I recognize that flaw, but it's kind of like sometimes when you, it's almost like even in conversation, it's almost kind of like a fight because when you're having a conversation and dialogue, it's an exchange. You should be able to allow everybody to say their piece, but it's almost like a fight because sometimes when you have an opinion on something, and sometimes the opinion can be personal, but it's just like, hey, don't you can't let that opinion just live. You have to shut it down. Mainly more so when it's directed at you, but that's something I have to work on and be able to determine if I try to learn as I go. And me, I listen to other podcasts and I resonate with those podcasts. I resonate with the people when they're speaking. And then even when I was having trouble getting to this episode, I got seen something by Mace, Pastor Mason Betha, as someone would say. And there was a clip on Instagram. He was talking about, there's always that missing piece. Like sometimes people make jokes about it, but there's a missing piece. God is that missing piece. And then of course the comments are going to be the comments. Not to get too in detail with that, but it's like no matter how great life is, no matter how good your life is, or seem to be, no matter how cool you get, no matter how many positive relationships or interactions you have, God is that missing piece. And without God, if you think your life is great now, just imagine if you put God in it. But again, when there's a certain foundation, when you have a separate principle, again, nobody's going to want to change when they feel as though there's no issues. Like say, if you're a man and you have multiple women and you're always able to get the woman you want, or when you're a woman and men are always gonna support you and give you whatever you want. There's no reason for you to go to God. Sometimes you don't see anything wrong with it because you're being fed, you're being taken care of. A lot of times, the poor, the weak, the lost is closest to God's heart. It's closest because when you're in the need of God, we all need Him, but when you're in the need of God, when you're in need of Christ, you're at a moment of low because that's where you will see Him. But when you find Him, it's not impossible, but when you find Him, most people, the majority of people are in their weak moments, in their low moments, and then He will overflow that abundance once you find Him. Now, not saying, nor am I saying I believe that if you're in a more fortunate position that you cannot find God or have a foundation with a good foundation or a strong foundation. But it is it is known that when you're going through adversity, you have to find something greater than you to lift you up, to hold you up, to pull you up. Because when you lean towards your own understanding and you're wondering why things aren't going the way that you want them, and I'm not going to say that everything's going to go the way that you want when you have a foundation with God, but it will be better. You will have clarity, and I think that's the thing when you have a relationship with God, you have perseverance, wisdom. You will have the riches that you desire. And at some point, you will recognize that the riches that you desire isn't always necessary assets. But I do come up here, and when I express to you, my listeners and supporters, family and friends, I always want to be sound. Always want to be clear, and it was also addressed that sometimes I'm not always clear. And to be honest and transparent, that's important. So I'm going to take my time, maybe do a little bit more self reflection and taking the proper steps to come forward with security, clarity, and understanding. So if you did make it this far, thank you. And I want to also say that as I ask you the question, what's your foundation? My foundation, as I said already, is God. And I try to stand strong on my foundation with scripture. I don't always have the answers. And maybe it's wrong for me to be so critical and so opinionated without having all the answers. But, we're all work in progress. We can't live in fear, we can't hide. I know it talks about in those for those of you who are familiar with church when people say, come as you are. A lot of people might feel like, that means, you gotta dress up and be nice, bring your best. But I have a better and more clearer understanding of it thanks to the Harley Initiated podcast. They had a guest up there. I forgot the name. I believe it was the Edwards family, but there was a statement made and it was so clear as day, and it made more sense because, like I said again, we have influences, but the "come as you are" shifted in my mind to become as you go, and that resonated with me so much that I said, that's kind of how I am. I learn as I go, and sometimes as I learn, I share. And in all fairness, I overshare sometimes. Like it might not be time for me to share this shit because I don't 100% understand it. Because God knows more than you. So when you're giving out information, it can be great information, like very positive information and effective information. But when you're giving information out and you can't really double down on or explain or answer to when someone has questions, then you kind of put your foot in your mouth. So I think that's the difference sometimes when it talks about, in Proverbs, lean towards not your own understanding. Because we all feel as though what we're saying and what we're doing is the right thing. And we're always going to have our own personal views and insight. But you have to really be, when it comes to holding each other accountable and forgiveness and compassion and love and working hard and success, certain things you don't not might not understand or explain because that is not it's not it's bigger than you, it's stronger than you. Sometimes you have to allow that to be okay. But when you're giving out information, when you're telling somebody something, you can't always understand it, but it's best to sometimes sit with the insight that you have. Because even when you're expressing your personal views and stuff, it's gonna be, it can get a little weary. But when it's something that is when it's meant to be productive and it's meant to be taken like, hey, this is a life or death. This is life or death information. You have to know this. It's something that you need to acquire, something that you need to live by. Then it's sometimes better. It's more helpful, more resourceful when you can provide examples. That's why I love my relationships with my friends. And I have one in particular who I mention all the time that you know we have a relationship, and I don't want to speak for them, but we always have each other's best interests at heart, even when we don't agree. But they know me well enough to know that my foundation is in a place of hey, this is I stand on the foundation of God, of Christ, of the Holy Scriptures, and I do sin, but you know that's how I treat my relationships. But as I grow in life and in Christ, I look at work differently. I look at relationships differently. So I encourage and enlighten all of you listening. When you have that foundation, hold on to it. Always stay safe, prosperous, productive, and positive. And I'm just now realizing why that's always been the motto. Closing out the podcast. Because that's what I believe. That's what I want. That's what I desire. That's what we need. And the man of God for me needs that and wants that for you. Because that is part of my foundation. As a child of God, a man of God, I want greatness for everyone. And I'll close with this, saying that we all have our opinions. We all have our faiths. But without God in your life, nothing is more significant.